people, you'll see that if you learn only about Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, you cannot take just his character and his leadership and apply it in everything in your life. You can't look at just Umar radiallahu anhu and take just his attitude and his character and apply it in your life. Nor can you do the same with Uthman and Ali radiallahu anhu ajma'in. But when you study their seerah, you will find that all of them complemented the other person. They can't be on their own. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu could not be on his own without Umar. Umar could not be on his own without Abu Bakr. And Uthman, Ali and the rest of them. They each complemented each other because Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was not perfect for the people. Before he became a Khalifa, he was what? Who knows how he was? What kind of attitude or character did he have? Was he harsh or soft? He was very soft, very kind-hearted, very forgiving. How was Umar radiallahu anhu before that? Very harsh and strong. And when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu got too soft, who picked him up? Umar radiallahu anhu picked him up. And so did Uthman and Ali and all the other companions, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course. And when Umar radiallahu anhu got too strict, who brought him back down? Abu Bakr and the others. So each Sahabi, each companion of the Prophet ﷺ had a different personality. And they all complemented one another. That's why Allah put them all together. So brothers and sisters, when you study their lives, don't ever look at just one companion and say, this is how I'm going to be. I will tell you that you will relate. Each one of you here relates to one of the companions. Some of you may relate to Umar radiallahu anhu very well. Some of you may relate to Abu Bakr. I personally found myself relating to Uthman radiallahu anhu. And honestly, I was moved to tears when I was studying his life in detail. Wallahi, I couldn't stop my tears. So sometimes you relate to someone in a different way. And the type of people that you've encountered in your life, you'll find yourself having a connection with that Sahabi because of the type of people you're encountering. So Umar radiallahu anhu encountered a different type of people to the rest. And hence, you will see why his tough, straightforward personality came to light. A lot of young people, they attach themselves too much with Umar radiallahu anhu. As soon as we talk about him, they say, wow, I want to be like him. Then they think that this is the way to be with everyone. That's wrong. You need that other person who softens you a little bit. You need to humble yourself sometimes. Sometimes you need to be strong. It depends on the situation. None of us is perfect. So that's why the Prophet ﷺ said, "Alaykum bi sunnati." You are to follow my sunnah. And he said it individually because Rasulullah ﷺ is khuluqun azim. He has the perfect character. He was the all-rounder, the balanced one in all his character. وَسُنَّةَ الْخُلَفَاءِ الرَّاشِدِينَ الْمَهْدِيِّينَ مِنْ بَعْدِي. And you are to follow the sunnah of the rightly guided, wise, mature khulafa that come after me. And they are all the scholars, Al-Sunnah wal-Jama'ah, agree that these khulafa were 5. They were Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, and Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who was later on, he came later on. The sunnah of the khulafa means that they followed the Prophet ﷺ the best. It doesn't mean they brought a new religion. Some people, they misunderstand this. They say, oh, the khulafa means whatever they do different to the Prophet ﷺ is also a sunnah. No, they did not come to add to the sunnah, nor to change the sunnah. In fact, they just came and they relived the sunnah in the different circumstances. And in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, the things that happened in the time of Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali did not happen in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught them, but they lived them. And in each one of their lives, you will see a type of people that exists in the Ummah today until the end of time. And you see how they dealt in each situation. So here we go. Umar radiallahu anhu. Umar radiallahu anhu, first of all I want to say this. He was a straightforward person and direct. There is a difference between being direct and straightforward and between someone who is blunt and rude. Big difference. Umar radiallahu anhu was straightforward and he said it as it is, whether you got upset or did not. Whether it was good news or bad news, satisfaction or non-satisfaction, he would say it. Straightforward. How you felt, none of his business. However, just be careful. He didn't say stuff based on his own emotions. It wasn't his own emotion. It wasn't like a person who is really rude. You know, we call these people certain names in English. Whether she's a woman, we call her a particular name of being rude, and if it's a man, we call him a particular name, being rude. Doesn't care about other people's feelings except their own. Umar radiallahu anhu was not like that. He was a man of principle and value. He had solid values, solid principles, and he studied them well. And until he was sure that they are the right values, he would stick to them very strictly and very firmly. And then he would tell the people, and guess what another thing was? He had firm, strict values and principles, and he applied them on himself before he applied them on anyone else. And another thing about Umar radiallahu anhu, so people don't misunderstand, between being straightforward and blunt, because Umar was like that. No, he wasn't like that. He was straightforward based on principles and values that were correct, number one, not on his own whims and desires. Number two, he applied it to himself before others. And number three, he always welcomed criticism. Always welcomed criticism. He would love it when people pointed out his fault. He looked at it as productivity. He looked at it as constructive, going forward. He did not get upset with anyone who pointed out his fault. Anyone can disagree with him or agree with him. He could agree or disagree with you. But when the truth was told, he loved it and he respected you with all his heart. You understand the difference? Some people, they go out and they don't give a beep about what anyone thinks and they just do whatever they want. That's not the way to be. Just do whatever you want. No shame, no value, no care, no respect. That's not the attitude that a Muslim should have. Umar radiallahu anhu cared about people's feelings. In fact, you will find that he was so emotional. He had a deep emotional, very deeply emotional. And he was very empathetic. He used to have empathy, he used to feel with people. But when it came to the truth, he did not care what people thought. Even if it meant his own son, his own wife, his own daughter, himself, he did not care. The truth is the truth and he will stick to it. And that is why the Prophet ﷺ called him Al-Faruq, the divider, the one who clears things up. Umar radiallahu anhu, his father's name was Khattab, Omar ibn al-Khattab. His mother's name was Khattab. He was from the tribe of Adi, from Quraysh. Adi is a highly respected tribe in Quraysh. And his family were what we call the delegates of Quraysh. Whenever they wanted to talk, if they had a conflict with a tribe outside, they would send people from Adi, from Umar's clan. And they were judges. If there was a feud between people, it was Umar and his clan who judged people between right and wrong. But that position was not very important. It was not really important because no one really followed judges. And number two, Quraysh was respected by a lot of people. They hardly had any feuds. So it was just really a name. Umar radiallahu anhu was just a name. However, respected as the ambassador of Quraysh. Now, one thing about Umar radiallahu anhu, I don't want the men to get too excited with this news. I'll just have to tell you because this is how they were in those days. In his lifetime, he had 9 wives. He married 9 wives in his whole entire lifetime. And, even after Islam. And that was very normal in those days. They used to marry and divorce a lot. And most of his wives, in fact, if not all of them, they were either divorcees or widows. These are the types of women that Umar radiallahu anhu married in his life. In fact, he said, if I had no wife before I die, and it was the last thing that I do, I would still get married, even if I had a day to live. So the reason he said that is in order to say to us that your value, your purpose in life, your respect, your self-respect and your self-esteem rises when you have a family and a wife. And secondly, you feel more like a man when you do that because you have purpose. And number 3, it keeps you away from haram and being like a little boy, an immature boy running around and lusting behind his temptations. So Umar ibn Khattab, this is the type of life he loved. He had 12 children, 8 boys, 4 girls. He named them Abdullah, Hafsa, Ubaidullah, Asim, Zayd, Ruqayya, Ayyad, Abdul Rahman, Zainab, Az-Zubayr, Fatima, right? And Abdul Rahman as well, number 2. So you can see Fatima is the Prophet ﷺ's daughter's name. And Fatima is Ali radiallahu anhu's wife. And she's Fatima az-Zahra, one of the 4 great women. And Ali Umar radiallahu anhu names one of his daughters Fatima. So you can see that there is no difference between the names and we respect them all. He was trained in fighting and combat at a young age. He was an excellent public speaker. He had unusual courage, sharp-witted, frankness, eager to learn, followed through every duty he took. And one very important thing about him and Hamza radiallahu anhu, and Omar, there was one thing that all of Quraysh knew about them. When he said something, he's going to do it. Even if it was wrong, if he's convinced it's right, this was before Islam. If he was convinced it's right, and he said, I am going to kill that person, it doesn't matter. You can bring the entire universe to stop Omar. You would have to kill him in order to stop him from killing that person. He's going to go and do it, no matter what. And Hamza radiallahu anhu was like that. That's why everybody moved away from him and Hamza. If Omar, don't get him angry, because if he gets angry and he says something, he's going to do it. He's not going to back down. But obviously after Islam, he became lenient with these things. He did trade. He went to Syria. He was street smart. He was people smart. But he was, as I said, very harsh, very strict. He was about 12 years younger than the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with the message of Islam, how old was Umar, do you think? Have a guess? He was about 27 years old. He was about 27 years old. Who was the oldest companion who converted to Islam? It was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. In fact, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he first migrated and entered into Medina, they said there was no other companion who had white hair other than Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. So Umar radiallahu anhu was one of the youth, and so were the rest of the companions. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's companions were all youthful. Umar radiallahu anhu was about 27. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with the message. Now, how did Umar look like? So that we can put you as if you can see him in front of you. I want you, brothers and sisters, to know this. When we talk about the companions, don't think they're over there and we're over here. Don't think just because they're 1,400 years ago, they're different to us. Or they're companions of the Prophet, there must be something special like angels descending from the heavens. No. They were human exactly like you and I, with the same emotions, same thought process, same psychology, same ups and downs, same weaknesses and strengths. They were normal human beings. They did right and they did wrong. So they are role models, of course. So we can imitate them, we take them as role models. He was extra tall. He was a very tall man. If you walked in here, it almost touched the roof. He was very built and solid. He had a very big voice. If he whispered, you can hear him at the end of the masjid. He was a very big voice. He was white in color. When we say white, it doesn't mean he was like the British white. The Arabs, when they ever called someone white, it meant they had a light tan. That's what it meant. Otherwise, they used to call the Romans, the British looking, they used to call them yellow in Arabic. But the Arab who was light tan, they call him white. So he was white with a very light tan, and he had a red complexion with red hair. Omar radiallahu anhu had red hair, reddish hair. And he used to extend down to his shoulders, and he was also bald. At a young age, he was bald, radiallahu anhu, which means high testosterone levels. Not to put down the brothers who still have them. And my dear brothers and sisters, I'm losing my hair a little bit, so good for me. My brothers and sisters in Islam, his relationship to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and the Prophet ﷺ was one of a loving relationship. One who hears about it and listens to it, you would think that he had a problem with Abu Bakr. But Umar radiallahu anhu disagreed a lot with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He disagreed. I was saying this yesterday, that Rasulullah ﷺ said that he knew that Umar and Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu used to disagree so much on opinions, other than black and white Islamic stuff. Halal and haram is halal and haram. But in between, there are opinions, isn't there? And that's just to show you, brothers and sisters, that Islam is not a black and white religion. There are situations, things can be, where there is room for your opinion. But Islam is the policy, is the principles that we follow, right? And we base our judgments on it. So they used to disagree on a lot of opinions, to the point where the Prophet ﷺ used to say, if if Abu Bakr and Umar used to say, if you two ever do agree on anything, then don't come and seek my advice at all, because it must be right. If you agree on something, it must be right. Subhanallah. And yet they disagreed a lot, and which is fine. But you see, brothers and sisters, it teaches us that disagreement doesn't mean enmity. It doesn't mean division. You can disagree on certain things, and sometimes even things that are clear, black and white, but someone may not know. It doesn't mean we come down upon them and call them all these terrible names, and some people take them out of the fold of Islam. Yani one Sahabi, what was his name? His name was Nu'aym radiallahu anhu. He used to be an alcoholic. And whenever he came to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to be punished for drinking alcohol, the punishment, the capital punishment for it is 40 lashes in public in order to deter people from intoxication. Because intoxication, in fact in Australia they did a study, I don't know if it's the same in the UK, that the most dangerous intoxicant that causes the most harm and damage is alcohol, number one. That's even before ice and every other type of drug. Anyway, this man comes in and he's become an alcoholic. And every time he'd come, he'd get whipped. One day, Omar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu said a nasty word about him. He said, what a terrible man he is. He gets punished, he has no shame. He comes back to get punished again. Why doesn't he stop the alcohol? Rasulullah turned to Umar radiallahu anhu and said, no, ya Umar. See, you always have to, stop him. No, ya Umar, for Wallahi, I know that he loves Allah and His Messenger. Now, don't get me wrong. When you say love, it's not like, yeah, I love him, you go and do your own thing. And there's nothing that shows your love. I mean, if you've got a husband and wife, and the wife says to you, I love you, but she does nothing that a husband loves in a woman, where's the love gone? Your husband, he says, I love you night and day, but does nothing to make you feel more important. You say to yourself, I don't think you love me at all. So love has conditions. Don't go and sometimes say, oh, I love Allah and His Messenger, and you go up committing all these haram things. So he goes, I love him, meaning he does everything else except for alcohol. He's got a problem in it. And subhanAllah, he stopped him from doing that. So, disagreements are okay, even some people may not know. Even when they're doing their sin, we still assume well about them and we look at them as potential people who can become better. We have to remember our own faults. From here, Umar ibn Khattab used to remember about himself. From this type of schooling from the Prophet ﷺ, that he always used to look at himself and used to say, I have problems myself. Umar don't think that he didn't sit down and reflect upon himself. He used to judge himself every night. In fact, he had a diary. Men don't do that too often, women do that, they write diaries. I mean, I just picked it up about 3 years ago, writing a diary. Wallahi, it helps you a lot. You write a diary and you reflect on your situation, what worked, what didn't work, how did you solve this problem, it worked, it didn't work. You learn a lot about your life. And Omar used to do that, and used to cry tremendously whenever he read in his diary. So my brothers and sisters in Islam, this is how he was. Umar radiallahu anhu, he married Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu's son's widow. His best friend, his son, he died in battle. Omar marries his wife. And this tells us that in Islam, we have this thing where if a best friend marries someone else's widow or divorcee, we never talk to them ever again. And I know it's very hard, and we think this is disloyal. But when we look back at the companions, we found that they used to marry each other's wives, ex-wives and so on and so forth, and they still loved each other. And I think this is something that we can learn a lot from, inshallah ta'ala. My brothers and sisters in Islam, the Prophet ﷺ, he married Umar's daughter. Which one? Who knows her name? Hafsa radiallahu anha. And they always, Umar learned something about Abu Bakr. He learned that he should never upset him. And he learned that he should always forgive him. Umar radiallahu anha had a problem with forgiving people. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was brought by Allah to teach him how to forgive people. Because what's the thing about forgiveness, brothers and sisters? When you forgive someone, it means that you take off the load off your shoulders. Human beings are not naturally equipped to deal with grudges and hurt and pain. So when you don't forgive someone, they might go along, they're partying all day, all night, not thinking about you, but you're still holding a grudge all these years, especially with family. You're the only one that are harming yourself. So when you forgive, let go of the hope of changing the past, and also let go of the burden that's on your heart. And Abu Bakr taught Umar radiallahu anhu how to forgive. And this is what happened one day. They had a disagreement, and then suddenly Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu enters the masjid and sees the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Abu Bakr was very scared. He was not happy. So he says, Ya Rasulullah, Umar and I disagreed on something, and because he was so blunt, I was so blunt with him. No, sorry, he was so blunt with me. I said a word that upset him, and I realized I shouldn't have said that word, Abu Bakr. And I asked Umar to forgive me, and he wouldn't forgive me. So I'm complaining to you, Ya Rasulullah. And the Prophet ﷺ looks at Abu Bakr, he touches him on the chest and he says, Allah has already forgiven you, Ya Abu Bakr. Allah has already forgiven you. You don't need to do anything. Your mistakes are forgiven by Allah. That's how great you are. So Umar radiallahu anhu enters feeling bad, because that's the type of person he was. He would upset you, and then until when he has to get very angry first. And after he's done his deed, he comes back and then he starts regretting and he makes it up to you. That's how his nature, subhanAllah. So he entered the masjid and he said, Ya Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah. The Prophet ﷺ looks at him and he was angry at Umar. And Umar, when he sees the Prophet ﷺ angry at him, he becomes petrified. He just sits down, he puts his head down, doesn't dare to say a single word. Rasulullah ﷺ. So Abu Bakr, when he realized this, Abu Bakr got up on his knees and he said, Ya Rasulullah, please forgive Umar. It was my fault. I'm the one who started it. And then he says, Omar, you say you don't forgive him? He said, I do, Ya Rasulullah. He said, can't you leave Abu Bakr alone? Can't you leave my friend alone? He was the one who supported me. He's the one who never hesitated when he believed in me. Everybody hesitated except for Abu Bakr. فَهَلَّا أَنْتُمْ تَارِكُوا لِصَاحِبِي. Please leave my companion alone. SubhanAllah. Only Abu Bakr was allowed to do that, and Umar had to learn from that day onwards, never think of upsetting Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, because the Prophet ﷺ will get upset. And always forgive. And so Umar learned how to forgive. And this was the first sign of him doing so. My brothers and sisters in Islam, one day, I'm just introducing very quickly, these are important points. Before I go into his seerah very quickly, these are important points. One day the Prophet ﷺ was walking with Abu Bakr. They were walking together. And then he said, Ya Umar. Umar was walking with the Prophet ﷺ. He says, Ya Umar, you will not enter paradise until I am more beloved to you than everything. So Umar said, Ya Rasulullah, this hadith is in Bukhari, says, Ya Rasulullah, I love you more than anything except myself. Remember what I said about Umar? Even if it's against himself, he'll just say the truth. But myself, I don't. That's the truth. So the Prophet ﷺ says, no, Ya Umar, not enough. Until I'm even more beloved to you than yourself. So Umar takes a time out. He waits for about a few minutes. He thinks and thinks and thinks. Then he smiles and looks at him and says, Ya Rasulullah, now I love you even more than myself. What changed? Prophet ﷺ said, what made you change? He said to him, Al-ana ya Umar, now you have reached the highest iman. How did you do it? Umar said, well, I thought about my values and my mistakes and my ups and downs. And I thought about your character and your values and your ups and downs. And every character that I found, I looked at, I found that I was right here and you were right above there. And because of all those characteristics which I love, I found them in you, Ya Rasulullah, and I could not find them in me. Based on that, I love you more than myself. So what is the love for another person? The love for a person is based on the love of the character of the person, brothers and sisters. Isn't that correct? Sometimes they treat you well, you love them more. I know it's a bit selfish, we shouldn't really love people just based on their treatment to us. But that treatment is a treatment of generosity and goodness. And what you actually love about the person is actually the character. And thus some people, they hate themselves for that, right? Because they don't have that character. Some people, they get jealous. So loving someone for the sake of Allah, meaning loving the character which Allah loves in that person. And that's really natural. We love honesty, we love trustworthiness, we love that person. Unless you've got a problem with yourself. My brothers and sisters in Islam, Rasulullah ﷺ was once, he entered a well called Well of Aris, and Abu Musa al-Ash'ari was with him, radiallahu anhu. And he said, I want to stand at the door. There was a door of entrance, and he said, I'll only let to come in whoever the Prophet ﷺ gives permission to. The door knocks, and then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu enters, and the Prophet ﷺ said, let him enter and tell him he will be in paradise. Then another knock happened, and it was Umar radiallahu anhu. The Prophet ﷺ said, let him enter and tell him he will be in paradise. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu sat on the right side of the Prophet ﷺ. Umar radiallahu anhu sat on the right side of Abu Bakr. Then the third person enters, and he was Uthman radiallahu anhu. And the Prophet ﷺ said, tell him to enter and tell him he will be in paradise, but only after a trial, a fitna befalls him. And Uthman radiallahu anhu entered saying, Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakeel. And then he sat on the opposite side on the well, in front of the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr and Umar. Later on, this proves two things. That it was the Prophet ﷺ is going to die, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is going to take over. And Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu is going to die, Umar radiallahu anhu is going to take over. Umar radiallahu anhu is going to die, and Uthman radiallahu anhu is going to take over. And also the way they were buried. Rasulullah ﷺ, on his right is Abu Bakr, on the right of Abu Bakr is Umar, and Uthman was buried in Al-Baqiyah, in another place. So this was the situation foretold by the Prophet ﷺ. My brothers and sisters in Islam, the da'wah to Umar is very interesting. As we said before, Islam was extremely harsh. When he found out that family members had embraced Islam, he is the one who stood up and said to his uncle Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl was his uncle. His name was Umar. And Umar radiallahu anhu's name was Umar. So he was Amr ibn Hisham, Abu Jahl, and Umar radiallahu anhu was Umar ibn Khattab. He got up to his uncle Abu Jahl and he says to him, Ya Abul Hakam, man of wisdom, he used to call him. Every family member who converts to Islam, I say that their family is responsible to punish them and torture them until they leave Islam. So Umar ran a campaign of torturing people, imprisoning them, and one of the women of his family, he used to torture her and tied her up. And he used to whip in front of everyone. He used to take the lead. Because as I told you, if he thinks something is right, he will do it. One day, the Muslims were migrating to Abyssinia. You know, the migration to Al-Habasha. And there is this woman by the name of, we call her Abdullah. Abdullah bint Abu Hanifa. She had embraced Islam in secret, and her husband were migrating to Abyssinia in secret. So Umar radiallahu anhu sees her from a distance, and he realizes she's migrating. So he approaches her, and he asks her in a tender voice. This is the first time we ever hear about Umar in his life being tender towards someone else, who was opposing a principle which he followed. He said, Ya Abdullah, are you leaving? And she looks at him and replies, yes, Wallahi, you will travel in God's land away from your tyranny and your oppression to us. This is a defense. She's scared, but this is what she said. When Umar realized that, he looks at her and he had sadness in his eyes. And this was the first sign of his sadness. And he says to her, Sahabat salam, may peace be with you. So Abdullah goes to her husband, she runs to him, and she says to him, do you know what happened right now? If only you saw Umar just then, his face and eyes were sad, and he had compassion. This is unusual. Her husband looks at her like a typical husband and says, and let me guess, you think that he'll become Muslim, Abdullah? And she says, I think so, I can feel it. You know, they say that women have a sixth sense. You know, brothers, if you try to say something, she's reading something else. We men, we just look on the surface, right? Women, they ask you a question and then they search for the sixth sense. You don't realize she's looking deeper. You're answering and she's looking somewhere else. So anyway, and this is good of them being mothers with their children. So she said, I felt it. So her husband looks at her and he says, Abdullah, if you told me his donkey became Muslim, I'd believe it. As for Umar, he goes, his donkey would become Muslim before he'd become Muslim. That's how they thought about Umar. He was the last person expected to become Muslim. Even the non-Muslims knew that, the Muslims. 3 days later, Hamza radiallahu anhu converts to Islam. And then 3 days after Hamza, something happens. Umar radiallahu anhu starts to think about this migration, and he says, Muslims are being divided, Muslims are leaving, Muslims are whatever. Who is responsible for this division? That's what he thought it was division. But it wasn't actually a division. It was the people of Quraysh not allowing people to follow the faith that they wanted. They wanted to oppress them. Anyway, the story is long. You have to look at the seerah to understand it. So he starts making an idea. He said, I am going to go to the man who has caused this division. I've got an idea. I will go and kill Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And in his turn, I will go and give myself to Banu Hashim, the family of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they'll kill me. One man for one man. Now he's thinking the Arab mentality. You take one man from a clan, then their clan, instead of fighting your clan, just kill that man and then we're even. But he doesn't know who the Prophet ﷺ is. And you probably know the story. He takes his sword and it's shown, so he's not covering it. When an Arab took his sword, it's not covering it, means he's going to kill someone. Now what did we say about Omar? If he makes a decision, what's he going to do? He's going to do it. So he goes looking for Muhammad ﷺ, and he doesn't know that he is in Dar al-Arqam, a secret hiding place. This was in the first 3 years of Islam, and he was still in secret. Muslims weren't saying that they're Muslim out in open. As he's walking, one of the Sahabas, who was a Muslim in secret, he sees him with his sword open, and he says, Ya Umar, where are you going? Mutawashshihan sayfak, your sword is out in the open. He said, I'm going to kill that man, Muhammad, who is dividing the people. As I told you, he was outspoken. And then he got scared. He said, well, don't be a hypocrite. He said, me? Omar's not the hypocrite, man. He is anything but two-faced. He says, what do you mean? He says, you might as well start with your own family. He said, my family? Who? Tell me right now. He says, your sister Fatima. She has embraced Islam. He says, oh, Saba'at. Saba'at means they followed a nomadic religion. They left the Quraysh and they followed a nomadic religion, nomads. So he goes, yes, and her son and her husband, Zayd, and he goes straight to their house. He reaches their house and he hears someone reciting Quran. He was Khattab ibn al-Arat radiallahu anhu, who was tortured the most. He knocks on the door and his sister says, who is it? He says, Huwa dha ana Umar, I'm Umar, your brother. So they go and hide Khattab inside. He goes into a closet somewhere or something and he hides alone, doesn't whisper. She says, it's Umar, my brother, we're stuffed, we're gone, we're finished. So her husband says, open the door. He opens the door and he barges right in. He says, what is that you are reading? She said, it's none of your business. He said, give me what you were reading. What are you talking about? None of my business. You were saying stuff. I want to hear it. So she says, it's the Quran. She says, the Quran, and we have embraced Islam. And her husband rocks up and says, yes, we have become Muslim. And Fatima says, yes, we've become Muslim. So he smacks, he punches her husband to the ground. He starts bleeding. Fatima comes to protect her husband. And then he punches her in the face until he makes the blood seep from her nose on the floor. When he saw that image, Omar looks at his sister. He had never touched her in his life in a bad way. He said to himself, what has become of me? So he goes, look, just give me what you were reading. I want to read it. Now she knows her brother. She felt, hold on, he's being a bit kind over here. So she gives him the safha. Now some people say that she ordered him to go and have ghusl and I don't know what. I couldn't find any authenticity to this. Maybe that happened, but it was in the beginning of Islam. So she gives him the paper and he recites, طه ما أنزلنا عليك القرآن لتشقى إلا تذكرة لمن يخشى تنزيلا ممن خلق الأرض والسماوات العلى الرحمن على العرش استوى له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وما بينهما وما تحت الثرى وإن تجهر بالقول فإنه يعلم السر وأخفى الله لا إله إلا هو له الأسماء الحسنى. When he reached the part where it says he is Allah, there is no God worthy of worship but him, he has the best of names, Omar radiallahu anhu became teary, and this was the first time he cries heavily until his beard was soaked with tears. And he said the following words. He goes, words like this cannot have been said from a man. And words like this deserve to be followed. Remember what I told you about him? If he knows the truth, he says it. He said, I believe in it. And then he says the shahada. He says, I bear witness in the Lord of this book and that Muhammad is his messenger. Fatima gets up all excited. Suddenly who comes out of the closet? Khattab ibn al-Arat. He says, hey, I'll take you to him. He says, it was you, ya Khattab, who was reciting the verses. He says, it was me. I couldn't show myself because you're a tyrant, ya Omar. He says, you will not find me a coward in Islam, inshallah. Take me to Rasulullah. So he takes him to Dar al-Arqam. They reach Dar al-Arqam, he knocks on the door. Who looks through the keyhole? One of the Sahabas. I think it was Zayd radiallahu anhu. Or was it Umar ibn Yasir? One of the two. He looks through and he comes back to the Prophet ﷺ and he says, it's Umar. Out of all people, Umar. And Hamza was sitting there radiallahu anhu, and he says to him, why are you afraid? Open the door. If he wants to come and fight us, there's lots of us, we'll kill him. And he's come for good news, we'll listen. Then Rasulullah ﷺ said, yes, Hamza is right. Open the door, it is good news. Rasulullah ﷺ comes with him and he says, actually, let me open the door. The Prophet ﷺ opens the door, Omar comes in. As soon as he comes in, the Prophet ﷺ grabs a hold of his shoulders and shakes him so hard until Omar fell to the ground. He says later on, I never felt the strength of the Prophet ﷺ until that day. And he said to me, أَمَا آنَ لَكَ أَن تُؤْمِنَ يَا عُمَرْ إِلَّا أَن تُصِيبَكَ قَارِعًا. When are you going to become a Muslim, Ya Umar? Until a calamity befalls you? You know why the Prophet ﷺ said that? Because before that, Rasulullah ﷺ was secretly going around the Kaaba. And he was constantly making dua, which all the companions knew. He used to say, Allahumma ihdi ihda al-Umarayn. Oh Allah, guide one of the two Umars. Either Amr ibn Hisham, Abu Jahl, guide him, or guide Umar ibn Khattab, because they were enormous strength. Abu Jahl was actually a great man to the Quraysh, except that he hated Islam. But he was a respectable man, an amazing man, a courageous man. And Rasulullah ﷺ wanted either of the two. And so it was Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. And he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa annaka Rasulullah. Everybody started hugging him. Hamza radiallahu anhu comes up and he starts to hug him. First they wanted to kill him, next minute he starts to hug him. And everyone comes along, and one of the people who embraced Islam was his brother, Zayd ibn al-Khattab. He had kept it a secret, and he looks at him and says, "You're a Muslim too, ya Zayd?" He said, "I couldn't tell you before, for you were a tyrant." And he said, "I will not be a khawwar after Islam. I won't be a coward in Islam." The next day, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu goes out. And the first thing he wants to do is what? He wants to tell the whole world that he's become a Muslim. So he goes out and he asks someone, he says, "Who is the biggest snitch in Mecca?" You know, do you have that word snitch here? Yeah. Who's the biggest snitch in Mecca? Who's the one that goes around, talks? And someone told him his name was Jamil al-Jumahi. Any Jamils here? Any Jamils? Imagine a Jamil marrying a Jamila, double trouble. Brothers and sisters in Islam, Jamil, he's the biggest snitch. So Umar radiallahu anhu comes up and he goes, "Hey, Jamil." He goes, "Yeah?" He goes, "Didn't you hear the news?" He goes, "What?" He goes, "I became a Muslim." He goes, "Sabat?" He followed the nomadic religion. He goes, "Don't lie, I became a Muslim." He goes, "Good for you, man, good for you." Because Omar. So he walks off slowly. "Yeah, it's okay, all right." He goes off. Within about an hour, nearly half of Mecca knew that Omar radiallahu anhu had embraced Islam. As he's standing there near the Kaaba, a bunch of men come along. And they said, "You embraced it? I mean, you've followed the Bedouin religion, the Sabat, you've left the Quraysh religion." He said, "No, I have become a Muslim. Jamil is a liar." They go, "No, he said that you Sabat, you followed the nomadic religion." He goes, "I followed the religion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." So they jump on, pounce onto him, and they started getting to a brawl. Him and them, one man against a bunch of men in front of the Kaaba. He started bashing them, they started bashing him, bashing him. For about 3 or 4 hours, they kept going at him until he fell to the ground and he was full of blood, he couldn't move. And then they looked at him and they thought, "Hold on a minute, he's from the Adi tribe, we better not mess with him. Just leave him alone, he's learnt his lesson." We gave him a beating. The next day, Umar ibn Khattab gets up, he hasn't had enough. So he goes to his uncle Abu Jahl. He knocks on his door and he goes, "Uncle," his maternal uncle, he goes, "Ahlan bi ibn ukhti, welcome my sister's son." And he said, "Didn't you hear the news, uncle?" Because he loved Umar. He goes, "What's the news?" He goes, "Aslamt, I became a Muslim." He goes, "Qabbahak Allah, may God make you hideous. And what bad news that you brought to me." He slams the door in his face and says, "Get out of my face." Omar, he feels proud about himself. He loves angering people with the truth. Do you understand that? This is the truth. And he loved angering people with the truth. Sometimes they're straightforward people. You don't all have to do the same. But that was Umar radiallahu anhu. He said to him, "No, I didn't make you to get upset." So then he goes in front of the Kaaba, and the whole of the Kaaba, like now about 30 men have gathered against him. He goes, "What, you've come for another round?" They go, "This time you're dead." And they start attacking him. He attacks them, they attack him, they start fighting, having a big brawl. Now Umar radiallahu anhu gets really tired, so he sees one of their leaders, his name was Utbah. He grabs Utbah, gets him into a headlock, jiu-jitsu headlock. And then he puts his fingers into his eyes, ready to poke his eyeballs out. And he says, if anyone approaches me, I'll poke your leader's eyeballs out. They said, "No, we don't want to lose our leader." And he goes, stay away. So they all back off. Then they start again. So he grabs another leader, he puts his hands in his eyes, back off. Suddenly, a man from his clan, he comes along and he said, "Have you all gone crazy? Don't you know what the family of Adi will do to you if you hurt Umar?" So they all backed off and they go to him. I think it was Abu Sufyan radiallahu anhu. He said he hadn't become a Muslim yet. He said, "Your cousin Sabah has followed a nomadic religion." He said, "So? A man chose a different faith for himself." And he was a wise man. But really he only did it because of tribalism, not because of truth. And they let Umar radiallahu anhu go that time. Abdullah, the son of Umar, later on, years later, he's raising his son. He says, "Dad, you know that guy who saved you on that day? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him. He saved you." This was years later. Umar looks at his son and he goes, "May Allah never reward him." It's straightforward. No, may Allah never reward him. That was Al-As ibn Wa'il. He never converted and he hated Islam. He only did it because he feared that my family will give him trouble. You know, that's why he did it. He did it for his own personal gain. So I'm just showing you that you don't have to do the same. But Umar radiallahu anhu was like that. You'll find actually later on that Umar radiallahu anhu used to say to non-Muslims, "Barakallahu fikum." May God bless you. So it's halal to say to non-Muslims, "Bless you. May God bless you," or "May God reward you in goodness." And you find Abu Darda radiallahu anhu used to do it, and many other companions. The next day, Umar radiallahu anhu goes to the Prophet ﷺ and says, Ya Rasulullah, are we not the truth? He says, yes. Are they not in false? He says, yes. He says, it's been 3 years in secrecy. What are we afraid of? Rasulullah ﷺ said, we're waiting for strength. He said, what do you want more than me, Hamza? You know, that's it. Let's go out and declare. Suddenly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the Prophet ﷺ permission. He says, go out and declare, but don't fight. If they fight you, try to defend yourself, but don't fight. So they go out, and Umar was a leader, and Hamza was a leader. And the Prophet ﷺ, as they walk through Mecca, they're saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And then Abu Jahl and the rest want to attack them. And then the leaders say to them, don't you dare attack that group. A group whose leaders are in front of Hamza and Omar, no sane or insane person should mess with them. And so they backed off. And the Muslims were very happy for the first time. The Muslims started to say, Wallahi, Allah had never honored Islam the day as He honored it when Umar radiallahu anhu became a Muslim and when Hamza became a Muslim. They felt their glory in everything. My brothers and sisters, then came the time when the Muslims were persecuted, and time passed until approximately the 9th year of Hijrah. Umar radiallahu anhu decides to migrate with the Muslims from Mecca to where? To Medina. Now this is what Umar radiallahu anhu goes and does. Every other Muslim is migrating in secret, not letting anybody know, because they were going to imprison them. As for Umar, he stands right at the door. You know, there's a gate that leads outside of Mecca. And he takes all his luggage and he says to everybody, he says, I am leaving to Medina. People, I am leaving to Medina. So whoever wants their children to be orphaned or their wife to be widowed, meet me on the other side. Open. Not one person dared to mess with Umar radiallahu anhu. So this is how Umar radiallahu anhu migrated. I'm just letting you know his personality. Not everybody has to be the same. You have to use wisdom. But obviously he had the strength and the ability to talk like that. Cutting the story short, Umar radiallahu anhu participated in every single battle with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Badr, Uhud, Khattab, every battle, Umar radiallahu anhu was with him. I'll just give you a little example in Badr, and I don't want you to misunderstand it. After the battle of Badr, they took some captives, and one man among the Muslims, he thought that Umar had killed his father. So he was a bit upset with him. And Umar realized. So he looks at the man and he says, you look like you're upset with me, you're holding a grudge. So the man didn't answer. He goes, you think that I killed your dad, don't you? That's what people are saying. He said, yes. He said, listen, if I had killed your dad in the battle, I will not even apologize to you. Why? He says, because he is an enemy of Islam. He wanted to kill the Prophet ﷺ and destroy the religion of Allah. And they are the ones who started us, and we went and fought them. Since your father was on the other side, he is no longer family in that time. But guess what? My uncle faced me and I killed him. And I do not feel any remorse at this point. He's trying to teach him that when it comes to this situation, the brothers and sisters in Islam are more family than others. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ used to say to Umar, you are like Nuh and like Musa. Nuh alayhi salam, and his son when he was drowned. So my brothers and sisters, Umar, cutting the story short, Umar radiallahu anhu, there's a lot to talk about, but I want to skip a few things. And I want to talk about this incident in the Battle of Tabuk. And the Prophet ﷺ was in need of wealth. So he ordered for people, he asked for people to donate. So Umar ibn Khattab used to look at Abu Bakr and used to think, well, Abu Bakr is always beating me in all goodness. So one day he sees him carrying a big luggage, and Umar was carrying something half his size. So he goes, today I will beat Abu Bakr in goodness. When they reached the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ said, Ya Umar, what did you leave for your family? And he said, I left them half of all our wealth. Abu Bakr, what did you leave for your family? He said, I left for them Allah and His Messenger. SubhanAllah. Only in that situation. I'm not telling you go out and donate everything you have. But in that specific situation, the Muslims were almost going to be annihilated. And Abu Bakr was the only one who gave everything away. And Umar cried and he said, لَقَدْ أَتْعَبْتَ مِنْ جَاءَ بَعْدَكَ يَا أَبَا بَكْرٍ. You have exhausted anyone who came after you, Abu Bakr. And this became his slogan. Whenever he sees Abu Bakr, he would say, I feel exhausted. I can't catch up to you. And truly, Abu Bakr was all the way up there. And Umar was the next best after Abu Bakr. He was all the way down here. Almost equal to the other companions. Abu Bakr was something else. But anyway, I just wanted to mention this particular incident. At the time of the Prophet ﷺ's death, we all know the story, Umar radiallahu anhu became almost stricken to insanity. That he stood up with his sword and he said, anyone who says the Prophet ﷺ has died, I will chop off his neck. Until Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu stood up and he said, whoever worships Muhammad, then he is dead. But whoever worships Allah, then he is everlasting, he will never die. Allah said, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا رَسُولٌ قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ أَفَإِنْ مَاتَ أَوْ قُتِلَ انقَلَبْتُمْ عَلَىٰ أَعْقَابِكُمْ وَمَنْ يَنقَلِبْ عَلَىٰ عَقِبَيْهِ فَلَنْ يَضُرَّ اللَّهَ شَيْئًا وَسَنَجْزِي الشَّاكِرِينَ. He said, Allah said, and Muhammad is nothing but a messenger like other messengers before him. As they passed away, he will pass away. If he is killed or he dies, are you going to turn against yourselves and lose yourselves? Whoever does so will not harm Allah, but we will reward those who are grateful. Umar radiallahu anhu then fell to the ground crying and he said, I had forgotten all about this verse. Later on, he tells his son, he tells Abdullah ibn Abbas, he says, do you know why I was speaking the way I was speaking when the Prophet died? He said, why? He said, Wallahi, it wasn't against Allah or the verses. But there was a verse that came to my mind which was, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا لِتَكُونُوا شُهَدَاءَ عَلَى النَّاسِ وَيَكُونَ الرَّسُولُ عَلَيْكُمْ شَهِيدًا. I remember the verse which says, and so we have made you a balanced ummah, so that you can be witnesses against other ummahs. And Muhammad, this messenger, is a witness against you. He goes, I understood this verse to mean that the Prophet ﷺ was going to live until at least all of us companions died before him, so that he can be witness in front of Allah that we all followed him. But I didn't know that he was going to die before us. And that's why Omar radiallahu anhu did what he did. Brothers and sisters, cutting the story short again, how are you feeling right now? You're feeling very hot? I'm feeling very hot as well. Look, if you're tired, please don't hesitate. If you want to get up and go home, you've got family, it's understandable. But whoever wants to stay a little bit more, I've probably got about 20 minutes and I'll finish.
Can I make a couple of announcements?
Yes, go ahead.
It's sad to cut Bayan short, and well, there's a few cars. I'm sat here trying to listen to the talk, and I've got the neighbour texting me saying there's a few cars parked on the grass verge, and police have been around, so fines will be sent to these cars. So, and it doesn't help our masjid. When you guys leave, the neighbours start complaining to us. So there's a car parked right outside. There's two cones there, meaning no parking here. They parked on the grass verge. So if this brother or sister, it's a Toyota W8 64MFG. So if that brother or sister could kindly move that car. There's also another Seat. So any cars parked on the grass verge, a humble request, please, brothers or sisters can move them now. Don't be ashamed to get up and leave and move the cars, please. Jazakumullah khair.
Brothers and sisters in Islam, when we learn about the companions, we learn about the treatment of other people before we learn about being in a class or praying. And I'm not saying all of you, I'm not having a go at anybody. But this happens also in Melbourne. We park in people's driveways and then we become abusive and rude, as if we are on jihad and everybody has to bow before our feet. So this is not acceptable at all. In fact, I'll quote something from Omar radiallahu anhu now than later, since the occasion has sprung up. Because wallahi, brothers, I feel for our community and our brothers and sisters. If we don't get this right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never be pleased with us. I'm telling you this. Umar radiallahu anhu used to say, I never get deceived. You know, no one can deceive me because they pray with their prayers or their fasting. I don't get deceived by a person's prayers and fasting. But I look at their treatment of others, whether they are just and fair or not. Because Allah may forgive his rights, but people will never forgive their rights. And you will find that Umar radiallahu anhu was killed by a non-Muslim. And when he woke up after he was unconscious, he asked that who killed me? Who stabbed me? And he said he was a Majusi, the fire worshipper from Persia. And Umar radiallahu anhu said a very interesting statement. He said, Alhamdulillah, that if I die, I am killed on the hand of someone who is not Muslim. Because on the day of judgment, I'm going to have to face this, Muslim brother and debate with him in front of Allah. I'd rather be a non-Muslim. Whereas other Muslims were killed by Muslims themselves, and they were so sad. They used to say that, we don't want to debate people in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Also, Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, a non-Muslim lady came along to him, and she asked him a question, and he said to her, why don't you embrace Islam? And she said, I'm not ready for that. When she had asked him something. And when he walked away, he started crying. And he said, why are you crying, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen? And he said, this woman came to ask me about her welfare. because I'm in charge of her welfare, something about her life. And the first thing I did was invite her to Islam. I may have forced her or made her afraid or pressured her to embrace Islam when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had forbidden us to do that. So her welfare was more important. Man, Omar ibn Khattab used to feed his camel. And when he went to feed his camel, he used to talk to his camel. He used to say to the camel, "Oh camel, oh camel, I fear that Allah will ask me about you if I didn't look after you. This is an animal," let alone a non-Muslim neighbor, my dear brothers and sisters. Did you know that the dua of the oppressed is accepted? وَلَوْ كَانَتْ مِنْ كَافِرٍ. These are from the Suhuf of Ibrahim alayhi salam. Even a kafir made a dua against you, if you've wronged them, it will be accepted. That's harsh, because on the day of judgment, a non-Muslim is not going to forgive you. A Muslim may, but not a non-Muslim. It's the worst thing to oppress a non-Muslim. And the companions were so careful on that. So my brothers and sisters in Islam, please, we need to be selfless and do the right thing, inshallah. Moving on, Umar radiallahu anhu was then elected as the Khalifa. Now I want to make a little point over here. How was the election of Khilafah done? There is no black and white process of electing a leader. Some people, they tell you, oh, it's got to be specific people. Some people say, oh, you've got to delegate. Some people say, oh, I don't know what, it has to be from Quraysh, it has to be from the family. Nothing in the Quran or Sunnah doesn't tell you exactly how to elect a leader. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu elected Umar after this. And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam hinted about Abu Bakr, but he didn't even say his name. So each election was done in a different way. Umar's election was done, and I don't mean to say, please don't misunderstand me, democracy is, obviously we don't accept it because it's based on human-made laws. But there is a part of democracy which Islam agrees with, a part of it. You know, there's some good in it. And the good part of it is, there's something called shura, which means an advisory council. Before making a decision, you see the opinions of the people. You don't see the opinions of the people whether alcohol should be halal or haram. The laws of Allah come first, and then other things, you see the opinions of the people. And whoever's going to be elected is elected for who? For the people. Umar ibn Khattab used to say himself, I am like a lantern that's burning. The lantern burns itself in order to give light to the people. I serve the people, and you will see how much he emphasizes this. So Abu Bakr is dying, and he says, who should you elect Khalifa before I die? And they say, why don't you choose it, Abu Bakr? He said, this is not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ for me to choose. I don't want delegation of electing a Khalifa becoming like an anarchy, like a king who gives a wasiyah, so-and-so is going to take it after me. That's not fair, and it's not just. The people have to be pleased with the leader. In fact, Rasulullah ﷺ said, if a person, this is Sahih Hadith, is in Bukhari, he says, any person who makes himself an imam of a people, as much as just salat, anyone who makes himself an imam of people, when people are displeased with him, they don't want him to be imam, then his salat or his imamship is a sin. It's unacceptable. It's false. It's batil. So my brothers and sisters, Abu Bakr said, you have to choose, but I will give you a hint. If you want my opinion, I prefer Umar. And they disputed with Abu Bakr. In fact, one man stood up and said, Ya Abu Bakr, what are you going to say to Allah? Fear Allah, that you are suggesting a man who is harsh to the people. Umar is harsh. What are you going to say to Allah when Allah says to you, why did you elect him? And you're going to have to say he's a harsh man. And Abu Bakr was unconscious. He said, get me up. They sat him up because he was upset. And he says to them, are you using Allah's fear upon me? You're trying to scare me with the word ittaqillah? The word ittaqillah should be used on a person who does injustice to others. If Allah asks me, why did you elect Umar? I will say, oh Allah, because Umar, in my opinion, was the most fair and just, and he will serve the people in fairness and justice. That is why he chose him, based on who is best for the people. Now the Sahabas got together and they had a dispute among each other, and then finally they agreed together. It's a long story. You have to go back to yesterday's talk about Bakr al-Anam, and they finally agreed collectively. First of all, it was a small advisory council of about 15 or 20 of the elite Sahabas, and they elected finally Umar radiallahu anhu, Uthman radiallahu anhu wrote it down. But Umar radiallahu anhu did not leave it like that. He accepted it, and he went out to the masjid and he stood up in front of the people. And he said, "O people, I have been elected as a Khalifa without my choice. are you happy with that? And all of them said, we are happy. Now you can imagine in Medina, it's still only a small bunch of people. No one has gone out of Medina too much yet. So it was like almost the whole ummah of the world accepting Abu Bakr, Umar radiallahu anhu, with a few of them disagreeing. And then Umar radiallahu anhu made an address. He said, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu first, he said, I have nominated Umar and so on, and he gave him some advice. And then Umar radiallahu anhu got up and he made his first address radiallahu anhu. This is what he said in front of the people. Listen to what Umar said. In front of everyone he said, Oh Allah, imagine like this is Umar standing and you're all listening. Oh Allah, I am harsh. What are the people thinking? What's the first thing they're afraid of? That the leader's going to be harsh. So what does Umar do? He puts himself in the shoes of the people. And he thinks, what do the people want? What are they afraid about me first? What do I have to change about myself? That's a leader. We are all leaders. You're a leader in your family. Are you a husband? A father? Are you a brother? Are you a mother? Are you a sister? You all have a responsibility and leadership towards someone, even if you have a pet. He said, Oh Allah, I am harsh. So everybody's listening to me. So make me lenient. People calm down. I am weak. So make me strong. You know what weak is? It means sometimes my emotions take over. That's the weakness. Not physically, emotions. I am greedy. So make me generous. Now the people are listening because he wants them also not to be greedy. Allah has put me as a trial upon you, O people, and you are a trial upon me. That's how we looked at it. He didn't say, I'm given this position, worship my feet. No. I am a trial to you and you're a trial to me. After my companion Abu Bakr. Your complaint to me will be heard by me, and my judgment for you will not be overridden or stopped by anyone else. Meaning, you don't have to worry. No one else is going to overpower it. You're going to get fair justice and judgment. If I take anyone's right, this is my cheek. I will place it on the floor for you to step on it until I have given you your right back. If I err, if I make a mistake and go off the path of Allah's book and His messenger, then stop me and prevent me. You are to me a responsibility like orphans, which I am responsible for. Compassion and caring. Compassionate and caring. And he spoke on and on. This is how he addressed his people. Difference. Then the first thing Umar radiallahu anhu did after that was he made leaders of people in different regions that Islam had spread in. And he went out to the market and he put a lady, a woman, an elderly woman, to be the inspector of all the tradespeople who is tricking consumers. And so she was like the what can you say it, the quality control person. The one who made sure that everybody was doing fair trade. That's where it started. It didn't start in the West. And anyone who was not doing fair trade, they were in big trouble from Umar ibn Khattab. Then Umar ibn Khattab, I'll just tell you there were some battles. I'm not going to say them all. I'll just say them in very brief summary. Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu anhu. He was the commander at the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And at this point, he had conquered nearly all of Iraq, Kufa and Basra. And he had gone into Syria, Sham, and almost with Amr ibn al-As to help him fight the Romans. Iraq was colonized by the Persians. Persia, and they had colonized Iraq. Iraq is an Arab country in those days. Yemen and Iraq and Basra, Kufa and Sham, Greater Syria, all Arab countries. And Persia and Romans had colonized and sat there. Illegally compared to what it was then. So Khalid bin Walid had done his thing at the time of Abu Bakr, and everybody was relying on Khalid bin Walid so much, to the point where even the Persians and the Romans feared, whenever Khattab was the commander, they said, don't bother even fighting them. And the Muslims would not fight properly until Khattab was their commander. Umar had opposed Abu Bakr about this. He said, don't make Khalid bin Walid the commander anymore. Put Abu Ubaidah. And Abu Bakr used to say, how can I put a sword back in which was unsheathed, and he is called the sword of Allah? Abu Bakr was right. But Umar still opposed him, and he wants to do what he thinks is right now. So he takes Khalid bin Walid off the commanding post. Why? Because he thought the people were relying on a man too much. No. I want you to listen to this very carefully again. They were relying on who? On a man too much. Let's bring it to modern day context. We don't have Khattab bin Walid fighting and jumping horses and taking over countries, no. What we have right now, and I have to talk about this, when we look at someone who is on social media and they say a couple of nice words and they're quite entertaining in the way they say it and very eloquent. Let's say it's myself, for example. Someone is attached to the way I talk and I become a celebrity chef. Suddenly you become attached to this person so much and we say, he's the best, the best, the best, the best, the best, the best. And then one day what happens? That person disappoints you. They do something wrong. I've seen people get too attached to celebrity people, or they're not even celebrities, we turn them into celebrities, or we get too attached to a man rather than the Prophet ﷺ, and then they disappoint them. And I've seen people leave Islam, just leave everything, because they were disappointed by certain people who they thought meant to be role models. Ali radiallahu anhu used to say, never attach or follow blindly a man, for men and women change. If you have to follow someone as a role model, then follow the righteous predecessors who are known for their righteousness and they've already died, because they will never change and disappoint you. Isn't that correct? Right. I also say in marriages, brothers and sisters, when you marry someone, don't marry them with the hope that that wife or that husband is going to change you. You know how they say it? I want a husband or a wife that will take me to Jannah. Together, we wake up for Fajr and we pray together under the moon. Romantic Hollywood fantasy. You only change yourself. And I have seen people divorced. Let's say, for example, I've seen, for example, a wife marries a religious-looking brother. She puts on a hijab and gets really beautiful and everything like that. Obviously, she's beautiful even without the hijab, of course. Allah has made everybody beautiful, but hijab is a religious beauty. And then they have a conflict. All the armor comes off the husband. He's not exactly what he was cut out to be or what she thought, because we watch too many Bollywood and Hollywood movies. And then they divorce. And then I've seen these sisters, they do this. Everything that reminds her about her husband, she doesn't want to do it anymore. Even if it's religion. Hijab, my husband used to like it. Ex-husband, I'm not going to put hijab. He used to like salat, I'm not going to pray. Right? He used to like, this or that religion, I'm not going to do it. You know why? And brothers do that too. You know why? Because you chose the person with the wrong intentions. Deen does not belong to people, it belongs to Allah. And if you're going to change, you change for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and then for yourself, not for the person. That's where the mistake is. My brothers and sisters, moving on. He took off Khalid bin Walid for that case, but still Allah gave him victory, and they were able to defeat the Persians in Iraq once again. If you know the famous commander Rustam from Persia, I won't talk, there's lots of beautiful stories about him, but cutting the story short, have you watched that movie called 300? You know that 300 is an inspiration from the story of the Companions, you know that, right? Like there's even one man, he says, he loses his eye in that movie, a long time ago. He loses an eye and his commander says, you've lost your eye. He said, God has blessed me with another eye. This never happens. And it's only the Companions used to say that. All right? And they show you the Persians coming in and they're on high gold thrones. You see them? They've got all these earrings on them and they've got these bizarre colors and everything. That's exactly how the Persians were actually. And Rustam came in with a high throne that had gold and pearls and diamonds. He was up there to try and intimidate the Muslims. And one of the Muslim generals, his name was Na'am. Not Na'am, his name was... anyway, one of the Muslim semi-companions, you can call him. He walks straight to Rustam and he sits right on his throne in front of everybody. He was a messenger and he went to Rustum, sat right on his throne right beside him. And he going, what are you doing up here on the throne? And he made a very famous statement. His name was Na'man. And he said, O king, not long ago we were an ignorant and wild people. Allah had mercy on us. He sent to us his chosen prophet. The prophet showed us the path of truth. And he kept on saying all these words. And then he says, O nobles of Persia, I thought you were wise, but you have proven quite silly. We Muslims do not raise men to the position of gods. The weak among us do not believe in the overlordship of the strong. I thought you also followed the same practice. I never knew that the strong among you were raised high and were worshipped by the weak people. I never knew that you did not believe in the equality of men. If I had known that, I would never have come to your court. I'll not even talk to you. But let me tell you that you cannot save your empire by these methods. Unrest among the weak will turn the tables against you. And he got off the throne and walked away while their nobles, this was ringing in their ear, because this is called injustice. Injustice. And no one will ever, succeed with injustice. And that's exactly how Umar radiallahu anhu was. He was exactly like the people. And they defeated the Persians and took over Iraq completely, and there was no more Persia in the Arab land. Umar radiallahu anhu, by the way, was not after conquests. Don't misunderstand it. Umar radiallahu anhu and the companions did not go out attacking other people's lands. No. These lands belonged to the Arabs originally, and the Persians came and took them illegally. And what the Arabs were doing, the Muslims, is that some of the Arabs, there are large tribes who had converted to Islam under the Persian Empire. And the Persian Empire had already threatened the Muslims at the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Remember that Kisra, when he ripped up the paper of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stepped on it, and he declared war against the Muslims. Now that they had risen, they were a threat, and they were threatening them. And they were taking over tribes that had converted to Islam in the lands of the Arabs. So Umar radiallahu anhu only, what did he do? He went to take back the lands that belonged to the Arabs, which should have been under Islam, by the permission and the request of the Arabs who converted to Islam under their illegal rule. That's all they did. I don't want people to misunderstand this. They would just go and take over non-Muslim countries. No. And then the Sham, Romans were also occupying it in the same way. And in the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, they also conquered and took over Sham. Sham is Syria, Jordan, parts of Turkey, and then there was Jerusalem left. Now I want to just say quickly about Jerusalem, it's a beautiful story. Jerusalem, now obviously when they took over the Persian stuff, they took their gold and their diamonds and they brought it to Medina. And they piled it up, millions of dollars, millions of pounds. And Umar radiallahu anhu cries. He says, I cry because riches beget enmity and mutual bitterness. A nation which has these evils loses its respect. So Umar never looked at wealth and everything as something glorious. He looked at it as the Muslims losing themselves later on. Fall of Jerusalem. The Christians in Jerusalem did not like the Romans, and they had given up on the Romans because they were oppressing them. But they knew that the Muslims, every land they entered and took over, they treated their people well, and they were very fair and just. But Jerusalem was a little bit different. The Christians thought that this is a holy land to the Muslims and to the Christians. So how can we guarantee that our safety, rights, and peace is going to be met? For the first time, the bishop, Christian bishop, he requested that the Khalifa himself, Umar ibn Khattab, come to Jerusalem and sign the agreement of peace himself. He wanted to ensure the safety of his people. So Umar ibn Khattab, he agrees. And he leaves Medina and goes on a journey of at least 4 months. You know how he rode there? He rode on a camel, one camel. And he had with him his servant, whom he hired, and he was his slave, but he treated him well. And because he had only one camel, to show you how fair Umar was, he said to his servant, listen, the road is long, so we'll share the camel. One moment I'll walk and you ride, another moment you'll walk and I'll ride. And so they kept changing like that for 4 months. When they reached Jerusalem, it happened to be that his slave was on the camel and Umar is walking. To the point where the bishop and the Christians thought that the slave was Amir al-Mu'mineen and Umar was his slave. And Umar had patches around him. He had like 16 patches on his clothing. because he was, poor, because he looked after the people before himself. And there wasn't enough for him to wear elegant clothing. And he sees Khalid bin Walid and Amr ibn al-As and Abu Ubaidah, and they were wearing cloaks with a bit of silk on it over their arm. And he got angry at them. He said, what? I leave you for 2 years and already you are getting attached to the world and you're following these types of people in their ways of being attached to the world. You will not succeed this way. And they said, yeah, Amir al-Mu'minin, take it easy. The customs of these people is that they look at you, the way you are dressed is how they look at your rank. So they need to know our rank. And anyway, we have our armor underneath. And he calmed down. He accepted that as being a valid reason. He enters and he goes to the bishop and he signs the agreement. And in that agreement, he says, from the servant of Allah and the commander of the faithful Umar, the inhabitants of Jerusalem are granted security of life and property. Their churches and crosses shall be secure. This treaty applies to all people of the city. Their places of worship shall remain intact. These shall neither be taken over nor pulled down. People shall be quite free to follow their religion. They shall not be put to any trouble. The bishop loves these words, and he came and handed over the keys of Jerusalem himself, and it was the most peaceful conquest in the history of humanity. The bishop says to him, it was Dhuhr time, and he says to Omar, come into our church and pray. The church, till today, it's called the Church of Holy Sepulchre, the most holiest Christian church today. He says, pray in our church. And Omar said, no. The bishop goes, what, already? You don't want to pray in our church? Why? What's the problem? He says, no, no problem. Because I fear that if I prayed in your church, the Muslims after me will take over your church and call it Omar's mosque. So instead, he stood on the footsteps of the church and he delivered a khutbah. After the khutbah, he says, bring me the agreement. He brings the agreement and he adds the following words. He says, and no one shall pray or call the khutbah from the doorsteps of this church, nor make the doorsteps into a mosque. The doorsteps. But then he goes to the bishop, tell me where is a good place for me to build a mosque. So they go to a place where the Qubbat al-Sakhra, the Prophet ﷺ ascended to the heavens, and the Jews liked this place, near Masjid al-Aqsa, and there was rubbish there. So he cleaned it up, and they built a masjid there, and it was called Omar's Mosque. Till today, if you visit Jerusalem and you go to Masjid al-Aqsa, right next to it, to the north, there is Masjid Umar ibn al-Khattab, the actual mosque which he built at that time. Had he taken over, his prayed in the church, what would the Muslims do after him? They would have called it Umar's mosque, because Muslims have to take over the world. No, that's not how it works. My brothers and sisters, there was a famine that happened, and then there was a plague that happened, and a lot of companions died. You can look it up, inshallah, I'm not going to go through it all. But there was one thing that's important. A famine happened in Medina, in Hijaz, in all of Arabia, and people became poor. And Umar ibn Khattab found that people were stealing to survive. So he suspended one of the laws of the Quran of severing the hand. He said nobody's hand will be severed for stealing. Why? Because people were in strife. Nobody turned up and said, Amir al-Mu'minin has apostated because he does not rule by the laws of Allah. I want to make this point very clear. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Whoever does not rule by the laws of Allah, then they are truly disbelievers. Umar ibn Khattab suspended a law that was black and white in the Quran, which is severing the hand of the thief. But he was not a kafir. Why? Because he was applying the law of Allah. The Quran also says, فَمَنِ اضْطُرَّ غَيْرَ بَاغٍ وَلَا عَادٍ فَلَا إِثْمَ عَلَيْهِ. If there is necessity without transgressing, then there is no harm upon it. And the objectives of Sharia is for the people to protect their property and lives. Their lives were at stake, which supersedes their property. So they stole in order to survive. And this is the objectives of Sharia and the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My brothers and sisters, just very quickly, Omar, he got a small monthly salary. Besides that, he would not spend a cent of the public money on himself or his family. At night, he'd use the public treasury to burn oil for his lamp, to see what he is writing, but only when he was doing official paperwork. Once his official paperwork was finished, he blew out the lamp and worked in dark for his own personal matters, so he doesn't use the people's money. Personally walked in the city at night and in the day to check on the people as if he was their laborer. And you all know the story of the woman who had the 3 orphans. You know that story? And he helped her and looked after her. And you know the story of when he said nobody shall mix milk with water. And you heard this daughter saying to her mother, fear Allah. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, don't mix milk with water to make more profit. And she said, where is Omar? He can't see us. And the daughter said, but Allah can see us. And Omar happened to be resting at their door because he used to walk around to check on the people himself. That's what a leader does. He walks to check on the people himself. You know, some people, I say to the da'is and the sheikhs, you have to be with your community. You can't just be celebrities walking around. You have to connect with your community as much as you can. That's the best da'wah. Inshallah. And the people who are in charge of things, you have to connect with your family, you have to connect with your people, with your employees. That's how you make a great leader. And he loved this girl, so he went and married her to one of his sons. And he said, if I had the ability to get married, I would have married you. But I'll give you my son. And later on, this is where Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was born, the 5th great Khalifa. Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, any man or woman or child could stop to talk to him or point out his mistakes. And he used to say, may Allah have mercy on the one who gives me my shortcomings. All citizens were equal before the law. Once someone complained about him, about Umar ibn Khattab. So he went to the court and the judge stood up for him. So the plaintiff and the complainant came along, Omar and the one who was making the complaint. And the judge stood up for Amir al-Mu'mineen Omar. Omar frowned at him and he said to him, this is the first injustice you have done to the plaintiff. Why do you stand up for me and not to him? Sit down and treat us the same. You see, even against himself. And lastly, Umar ibn Khattab, he made the social security welfare system, and he forced landowners to sell their land if they hadn't used it for many years, and many other things that Umar ibn Khattab did, which was equality and fairness. Lastly, I'll talk about his death. So, Umar ibn Khattab, he was walking in the market and he sees a man called Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi, the fire worshipper from Persia. He was living under Islam kingdom. And Abu Lu'lu comes up to Umar and he says to him, my master charges me too much tax. Now there was a tax that was allowed for the wealth that he made, because they didn't pay zakat, so they had to pay a tax. And the masters of the slave charged them that tax. He says, he charges me too much. So Omar said, how much does he charge you? He said, such and such. He said, what is your skill? He said, I'm a painter, I'm a carpenter, and I don't know what. And he said, well, the amount that he's charging you is very small. You know, you're able to easily pay that tax. You have not been wronged. And then he said, your day is coming. And Omar, he looks at him and he just smiles. He says, a slave threatens me, subhanallah, yalla ma'alash, let's move on. And so the next day he had poisoned the dagger, and he waited for Umar at Fajr to pray Fajr. Rasulullah had climbed Uhud years before that, and Uhud shook, and he said, be stable Uhud, for on top of you there is a prophet, a Siddiq, and 2 martyrs. There were Prophet Muhammad Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman. Umar and Uthman were going to be martyrs, and this was the day. He went into sujood in the 2nd rak'ah, and Abu Lu'lu climbed out of the ranks of the people and stabbed Umar ibn Khattab radiyallahu anhu several stabs, at least 7. And the way he stabbed him was that he poked it into his stomach and then ripped his stomach apart with a poisoned dagger until his intestines fell out. Umar ibn Khattab became unconscious and he stayed unconscious in his sujood. The Muslims looked up, something was wrong. They saw Abu Lu'lu'. Abu Lu'lu' ran away and he stabbed himself and killed himself. Crazy man. Then they took Umar into his house and they brought a doctor. And they looked into his stomach and he found that his stomach was open wounds. There was no way of healing. So he said to him, Umar ibn Khattab became conscious. He said to his children, he said, when he becomes conscious, farewell him, for he is a dead man. When Umar ibn Khattab became conscious, what do you think the first thing he said? No. Asalla nas, did the people pray? If any one of us, what's the first thing we're going to ask? Who stabbed me? Who's that? Who stabbed me? Who is he? We'll swear. He said, Asalla nas. You see, the leader is always, that's what he was. He was for the people before himself. Did the people pray? And they said to him, yes, Ya Umar, they finished their prayer. He said, Alhamdulillah. The person who stabbed me, was he a Muslim or a non-Muslim? They said he was Abu Lu'lu al-Majusi. He said, Alhamdulillah, that on the day of judgment I will stand in the court of Allah to debate with a non-Muslim. I would not want to debate until Allah complained to him about a Muslim. And then he went unconscious again. Then he woke up again. And he said, who's going to be the Khalifa after me? Who are you going to elect? So they said, who are you, Amir al-Mu'minin? Why don't you choose him? He said, I don't want to turn it into an anarchy. One person said, choose your son, Abdullah. He is perfect for it. And he meant it well. And he said, one person to be facing Allah on the day of judgment with the responsibility from the family of Khattab is enough. You want to leave you want me to live on with more responsibility and a burden? I have taken too much burden. It's been 10 years in this khilafah. Give it to someone else. I have too much to answer to Allah already. If I can meet Allah with nothing for me and nothing against me, then I'm happy, alhamdulillah. Choose someone else, not my son. So then said, who should we do? Then Umar al-Khattab said, okay. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned among the 10 promised paradise, 6 men. They are Ali, Uthman, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, Zubayr ibn al-Awwam, and Talha ibn Ubaydillah. Let them sit together and let them choose from among themselves who would they prefer. If they cannot agree on who to prefer, then let them vote. If their votes are equal, half-half, 3-3, then get my son Abdullah to facilitate. And to get the group where Abdul Rahman ibn Auf is with them and to elect one of those 3. And if not, then let Abdullah decide. Draw it out very carefully. Now, if you realize, one of the 10 promised paradise, the rest of them had died. Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah. He said, if Abu Ubaidah was alive, I would have elected him. Or the servant of Zayd, but he is dead as well. But then there was one more, his name was Sa'id. He was also one of the ones promised paradise, and he was still alive. But he didn't mention his name. Why? Because he knew that Sa'id could not lead. He's not going to be able to take the responsibility. He's not skilled enough. And that's part of the responsibility, not to give leadership or responsibility to people who cannot handle it. So anyway, finally, the process was long, and they came to the agreement that Uthman radiallahu anhu will be the next Khalifa. They got outside, and they asked the believers in Medina, and all of them agreed for Uthman radiallahu anhu to be the next Khalifa. And Umar radiallahu anhu gave him advice about how to lead the people, and then he brought his son Abdullah. He said, Ya Abdullah, get my head off your lap. Abdullah put Umar's head on his lap, and he said, get my head off your lap. For this head deserves to be on the soil. I am no longer Amir al-Mu'mineen, I am just soil. Ya Abdullah, go to Aisha and ask her if I can be buried in her spot. She was meant to be buried next to the Prophet ﷺ, and Abu Bakr, her father, said, ask her permission if I can be buried in her spot. So he went and asked her, and Aisha said, if there was anyone else, I wouldn't let. But Umar, let him. So then he goes, what did she say? He says, she allowed you. He said, oh Abdullah, when I die, I want you to ask Aisha one more time, just in case she was embarrassed or shy to tell you this time. He said, I will do that. And so Umar called out to Allah, and he had seen the Prophet ﷺ in his dream, and he said, Ya Abdullah, tonight is my night. So I bequest you with this and I bequest you with that. He gave him all his bequests. And then he said, Rasulullah ﷺ and my friend Abu Bakr are waiting for me to break my fast with them. He was fasting. And tonight is my night. Bury me with my clothes, just like my friend Abu Bakr. Meaning, rip my clothes apart and make them my shroud. And as for the new cloths, the Muslims are more deserving of them. And so Umar radiallahu anhu passed away on a Thursday, and he was 63 years old. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was also 63 years old, and the Prophet Muhammad was also 63 years old. But only the Prophet Abu Bakr died on a Monday, whereas Umar died later on. He had ruled for 10.5 years, and they were called the Golden Ages of Islam. Finally, Islam reached, since you've got Pakistanis here, I just want to tell you that in the time of Umar radiallahu anhu, they reached almost to East Pakistan, just outside past Persia, because they took over Persia, and nearly India. And the commander of the army, he got a bit tempted. He goes, I want to go to Pakistan and take it over. And Umar radiallahu anhu said, don't you dare. We have no beef with Pakistan or India. It's not our land, you come back. And he said, if it wasn't that Persia was a threat to us, I wish that there was a firewall between us and Persia, so that we don't have to think about them or even go and deal with them. He told them to return and not to shed their lives. So my brothers and sisters in Islam, this is Omar. I am so sorry that I went on too long. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you find it in your heart to forgive me. بإذنه تعالى. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. والسلام عليكم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We can ask the brothers and sisters.